Excellent. Thank you very much. In that case, I will start by welcoming everyone to today's webinar. I believe that this is the 5th webinar in this series on the use of mobile phone data. And today we're going to be talking about leveraging mobile phone big data for information society statistics. I'd like to start by first inviting Oliver Chinganya, the Director of the African Centre for Statistics at the UN Economic Commission for Africa, to give us some opening remarks before we launch into our speakers. Thank you very much, Oliver.
Oliver cannot make it today, so I'm going to provide the opening remark on his behalf. I think you can hear me, right?
Yes, we can. Thank you very much, and apologies for the confusion.
No problem. Yes, yes. We were trying to reach out to him. He has traveled. He's Mexico right now, but I think he's not online at the moment, so I have to come in on his behalf. Let me introduce myself. My name is Mola. I'm a statistician. I'm also part of the program management unit of the regional hub for big data and data science for Africa. I'm delighted, colleagues, to welcome you all to today's webinar, leveraging mobile phone big data for information society statistics, success, challenges, and future directions. The webinar organized by the UN Big Data and Data Science Regional Hub for Africa and the UN Task Team on Mobile Phone Data focuses on leveraging mobile phone big data for information society statistics. In a world where mobile phone usage is growing exponentially, the data generated presents a wealth of opportunities to shape policies and advance information societies globally. Today, we embark on a journey to explore the potential of mobile phone big data in generating valuable statistics crucial for understanding and enhancing information societies. Throughout this session, we delve into real-world examples, showcasing how mobile phone data, big data, has been successfully utilized in various countries to inform statistical insights. Our presenters will share their experiences, shedding light on the methodologies and approaches employed by governments and private sector entities to harness this data for statistical purposes. As we navigate through presentations, we'll also address the challenges encountered in leveraging mobile phone big data, including privacy concerns, data quality issues, and technological limitations. Our speakers will offer insights into potential solutions and best practices to overcome these obstacles. Looking ahead, we'll explore future opportunities and direction for maximizing the use of mobile phone big data and information society statistics. From available tools like the ITU Python codes to partnership and policy frameworks, we aim to equip you with the knowledge needed to harness the full potential of mobile phone data. This webinar serves as a platform for knowledge exchange, collaboration, and innovation in the realm of information society statistics. By engaging our speakers and participating in polling sessions, we aim to deepen our understanding and collectively contribute to evidence-based policy making and universal connectivity. As we progress through today's discussion, keep in mind our key takeaways, recognizing the transformative power of mobile phone big data in shaping information societies, drawing insights from successful case studies and implementation strategies, addressing challenges associated with leveraging mobile phone big data for statistical purposes, and exploring collaborative opportunities and future direction in advancing information society statistics using mobile phone big data. I encourage you all to actively engage with our speakers, share your thoughts, and make the most of this opportunity to expand your knowledge and contribute to the dialogue on information society statistics. Thank you for joining us today. Let's embark on this journey together. Thank you so much. Over to you, Thomas.
Thank you so much for your opening comments, and thank you for outlining the purposes and the key takeaways for this meeting. I think it's very helpful to ensure that everyone comes into this session understanding what we hope to achieve. So thank you for outlining that for us. Next, I'd like to welcome our excellent panel of speakers. I'm very excited to hear from them all. Today we will be hearing from Fredrik Eriksson and Esperanza Magpante from ITU and Margis Tiru from Positium. Before we start with the presentations, a small amount of housekeeping. We'll have a Q&A session at the end of all the presentations, but please feel free to submit your questions to the Q&A function on Microsoft Teams if you have any questions as the presentations go on. And we will then address questions either verbally or from the Q&A box after all of the presentations. So with that, I'd like to invite Fredrik to present first. Fredrik is a senior data scientist at Positium, and please feel free to share your slides when you're ready.
Thank you very much, Thomas. I'm with the ITU actually, but my name is correct. Yeah, sorry.
Apologies.
Okay, no problem. Can you all see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you very much also for allowing me to be here today. I will give you an introduction into mobile phone big data for policymaking, and specifically using mobile phone data for ICT statistics, and why it can be particularly useful and very important in many countries. I'll also be rather practical and highlight some of the key aspects when conducting mobile phone data projects. So just to begin with, this map shows the share of the population using the internet across the world. And this data comes from ICT household surveys that are conducted by mostly the national statistics offices in the countries themselves. And it's reported to ITU on an annual basis. So why is the ICT statistics important? Well, the access to digital technologies, as we know, is an enabler. It can inform businesses, it can identify investment opportunities, it can help improve government services, design new policies, or provide more opportunities for education and healthcare, for example. But what we see in this map is that there's an information gap in many countries on the use of ICTs, specifically here in Africa. And here, mobile phone data can be very useful to help close some of these gaps. Now, here's another map. Since 2015, ITU has supported several countries across the world conduct studies using mobile phone data. We also have a few ongoing right now, and a few more actually under discussion. But in addition, what is shown in this map is during COVID, there were more than 40 countries that used mobile phone data in various studies, quite often to track mobility or epidemiological modeling, to track or estimate the spread of the virus. And even though COVID was exceptional, which had many exceptional laws in place in many countries, it forced many different stakeholders to come together for the first time and really show the potential of using mobile phone data for policymaking. So where are we using mobile phone data? So I'm not going to get into this slide. This has been covered in other webinars as well, but it has been directly informed to inform a variety of domains. And many of these, as I said, has been part of other webinars. And in all of these use cases as well, there's dedicated guidelines available on the Mobile Phone Task Team website. But as I also mentioned, there's more information on who is connected, where, and how frequently can also help inform other policy areas indirectly. So it's very important just to keep that in mind. So just to go a quick quick recap, very quickly, what is the mobile phone data that we're looking at? Well, in general, most frequently, we look at cold data records and IP data records. Now, the benefit here is that they're already collected by mobile operators for billing purposes, and include information on the user's activity around the network. So this is the calls or SMS or data-related activities. Now, these can be very large data sets, but doesn't necessarily always have many columns, a lot of rows. So except the user, they often contain the time and duration of the event or the activity and the location of the cell tower to which the user is connected. But there's also mobile positioning data, which is used in some of the use cases as well. So the data is often generated by Promes, which monitors the data flows across the network. So this can provide a lot more detail, but so where the user is, but the data volume is much higher. So to become just a little bit of practical, because of the large data volumes, it's important with a robust technical infrastructure that allow you to process this amount of data and also have colleagues or yourself that have the skills needed to be able to do so. And in the different pilots that ITU have been involved in, we've seen three main models in terms of how the data has been processed in generally. So one is what I usually refer to as the operator-led, another one is the agency-led, and there's also sort of a hybrid where agencies in this context is government agencies or national statistics offices, for example. So there's a public-private partnership sort of when government agencies can access data that is in a secure environment in the operator's system. So looking at the operator-led processing, now here the data never really leaves the raw data never leaves the operator system, and they have full control and sort of deliver the aggregated data for the final indicator calculations. Now the benefit here is that there's low security risk of violating any privacy protection legislation, and in one way also less work in terms of doing the raw processing from the agency. And the operators they also have the technical infrastructure and the know-how quite often to do that work. But the lack of control also means that you're relying on the operator for many steps of the methodology, and it can include many back and forth between the operator and the agency to ensure that the methodology is followed and that other data is merged collectively and that the resulting data quality is good enough to produce the indicators. It also requires a clear commitment and some internal investments quite often from the operator to do this. Another model is the sort of more what referred to as the agency-led processing. Now here the data is anonymized and the pre-processing is taking place, but then shared with sort of the agency for further processing. Now the benefit here is that you have more availability of the granular data, and you have more control in making sure that the data quality is good. But this method is not always possible or acceptable with the operator. And it also requires setting up an own environment to process a large amount of data and ensure that you actually have the skills in-house to do the work. Now, a third method that we've seen is this sort of a combination of the two. It's a bit more complex to set up, but can provide the best of both worlds. So this was used in Indonesia. The BPS, the statistics office, got access to the operator's data through a sandbox directly in the operator's premises using a VPN. And the data that is available in the sandbox was anonymized and was a sample of the full data set. So this allowed BPS to work with the data and refine the methodology and define the algorithms that can then easily be shared with the operator then to produce the indicators based on the entire the raw data set. Now this is just as a technical person, I like this slide in a way because there are so many options right now. The project that ITU has been supported and been involved in, that every country has had its own technical solution based on their own experience, the infrastructure they have in place, and processing models and the skills they have. There's been many tools that shown on this slide that was used, Teradata, Hadoop, PostgreSQL, and Spark, for example. So it's difficult to sort of make a recommendation, but there's a lot of factors to consider when designing the technical environment. For example, looking at what you currently have, looking at the skills and IT support, the financial resources, and so on. But overall, the possibilities to store, process, and analyze big data has evolved in recent years, and it's more up to the practitioners to decide on the infrastructure that is the best place for your own use case. Going a bit more technical to the processing, after the sort of the pre-processing, the merging with the data, other data sets that happens. Now this, as I said, this is mainly quite often done by the operators themselves, includes the anonymization or pseudonymization of the data, and merging not only potentially the CRM, the customer relation management systems, but also cell tower location data, which is very, very important, or aggregation of the data. So after that, it's important for to check the data to ensure that the quality is good for the rest of the indicators. And this could be, for example, looking at duplicated or data or missing values, some strange outliers that happened in one of the pilots that we looked at. There was a lot of strange outliers, which turned out to be network tests. So kind of like robots that looked and test the network that need to be removed. Otherwise, it would give a skew results at the end. In the handbook for using mobile phone data for information society indicators, there is a quality assurance checklist, which includes a lot of these tests. That can be a good starting point. But it's important to do the checks on the data, and in some cases then actually have to go back to the operators in case there's anything particular that you cannot do yourself in terms of correcting that. But in addition to the mobile phone data, the raw data, the CDRs, the IPDRs, and the cell tower location is not always enough. We also need more data, and this is what we usually refer to as reference data. So this can depend on the actual use case, but there are some that are a bit more frequently used than others. So for example, to create statistics, we often aggregate the results over certain geographic areas. So here, for example, the geodata, the geographic data of the administrative borders is needed. And this is something that the National Statistics Office usually have. Another data set that is often used is across most domains is the population data and the granular population data. In the area of ICT statistics, for a calculation of mobile network coverage, for example, another important data set in that case is the geographic elevation. What does the landscape look like? Are there mountains? Are there fields? Exactly what is the elevation of the landscape? And lastly, another example is actual data from household surveys or censuses that are important to use to validate or cross-check the resulting results that you get from the calculation. So this is just a quick note just on population data, granular population data. As I said, National Statistics Offices usually have these. There's also some other data sources, WorldPop, a research collaborative based on the University of Southampton, and also Meta, the parent company of Facebook, also produces high density population maps that try to improve the population to provide more granularity at the geographical level. So just lastly, a little bit on sort of how to get started. One is it's important to think of mobile phone data as any new data, and how it can be valuable and relevant to the public. What is the value added of using mobile phone data? Which indicators could be used and developed? based on the data, and treat it with the same security and confidentiality as survey data, for example, that is usually very strictly confidential according to the statistical laws. Before contacting the different stakeholders, which my colleagues also will talk about in the later presentations, it's important to assess the situation and better understand the legislations in place. There could be many different legislations in terms of how the data can be shared or accessed. There's also important to have an idea of the business model of getting access to the data from the operators. If there are specific laws in place, for example, that would facilitate using mobile phone data for statistical purposes. And also the resources you have yourself at the organization as well. And then it's also important, good to invite all stakeholders and have a discussion on all the different elements of the project. Now, the commitment is key, and the better prepared in a way, the better chances of smooth discussions. And it's important to also have a strong coordinating mechanisms to ensure that you don't get any surprises at the end while you're actually doing the project. So it's important to talk about all aspects. And just lastly as well, the timelines, realistic timeline, some aspects could take some time. And also starting with some sample data is always good to define the algorithms and methodologies. I don't know, I think that maybe these slides will be shared. I just added as well some resources, some links to documents that are very useful that on the website as well. So I think that happy to take any questions later as well, together with my colleagues. And I think they will go more into details as well on some of these aspects as well and the different pilots. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fredrik. Really interesting presentation. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And perhaps in case the slides aren't shared in a format where people can access the links, if you get a chance, perhaps you could share those in the chat for anyone who's interested as well. Yes, thank you for your talk. And I'd now like to hand over to Esperanza, also from ITU, to give her presentation. And a quick reminder to please, if you have any questions, add them to the chat or keep them in mind for the end of the session when we hold the Q&A. Esperanza, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Thomas. I suggest that I share first the poll and then maybe hand it over to Margus, and then I'll take my place. So I'll start sharing my screen for the poll, if you can maybe introduce the questions.
Absolutely.
Can you see my screen now?
Yes, I can now. I think we need the instructions slide. Yes, there we go. So if everyone who would like to take part in the poll, if you go to the website menti.com and use the code that's on the screen, I can also copy it into the chat. So the website is menti.com and the code is 116778882. And once you're there, then we'll start with our first question, which is, do you have experience in using mobile phone data coming into this webinar? And perhaps what I'll do is I can quickly run through the questions first, and then we can go back to the start and start seeing the answers coming in. So Esperanza, maybe we can go to the second question and we can run back through it, or?
Let's keep it for a moment here.
Okay. I'm not sure how it's set up, so whether we can skip forward and backwards, but maybe let's wait a second here and let some people join and answer this question.
think we have around 60 participants, so we are
Yes, I
still
can
waiting
see.
for the rest to join the
We'll give
menti.com.
everyone maybe another minute to allow people to join. Yes, the website is menti.com. The code is on the screen or it's in the chat. I encourage as many people as possible to interact with the polling if possible. So a little bit longer and then we'll move on to the other questions. I think we're starting to get a sense of the distribution of answers.
We have 24 people now.
Perhaps we can go to the next slide and we can come back and check on this one
Okay.
at the end if need be. So looking at the next slide, I think it'd be very interesting to understand from the participants the different policy areas that you would see mobile phone data being used in your own organization or in your broader context. So yes, certainly I hope some people can see information society being an application, as is the subject of today, but please do let us know. And if and those who are saying other, perhaps you can also let us know in the chat what other areas you see it being used in. Thank you for the comments in the chat, for the suggestions of civil registration and health as well. That's really interesting to see those being highlighted. Up to 19 answers so far, so we'll give it another 30 seconds for any last participants who want to add their answers before we perhaps move on to the next slide. So the next question looks at the largest barriers to using mobile phone data. This is always an important question, and please do share your thoughts about which are the major barriers. And if you want to provide any further context or explanation, then please again do add some comments in the chat as well. give it another few seconds for any last answers. I see that we're up to 23 responses, which 24. Again, if you answer other and you want to share some thoughts in the chat, then please do. Otherwise, perhaps we can move to the next slide when you're ready, Esperanza.
I think this is the main 3 questions that we would like to check. So
Okay.
I'll stop sharing the screen and back to you for the next presentation.
Okay, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for your participation in that poll. I think that it should remain live for those who want to continue adding further answers. But in the meantime, I'd like to invite Margus to please share your screen when you're ready. Margus is the Chief Data Officer at Positium, and it's a pleasure to have you today, and I look forward to hearing your thoughts on the subject we're discussing. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Esperanza. Also, Frederick. It would be very nice to have Frederick working at Positium, but we were colleagues at one time conducting the project that I'm going to present to you today. So my presentation today is aimed to describe shortly the project that was conducted in 2016 and 2017 already by ITU, in which I was a technical coordinator. The project called Big Data for Measuring the Information Society. Now, this was a pilot project to find innovative ways to utilize big data as a new data source for ICT indicators. As mentioned, this is already quite a project that was conducted quite a long time ago, but still very interesting results. And I think we all agree from ITU that this was a very good practical exercise on how to access the data and what are the obstacles there and how to resolve those obstacles. Now, about the project, there were 6 countries involved in the project from different parts of the world, so it involved quite a lot of traveling. The 6 countries were Colombia, Georgia, Kenya, Philippines, Sweden, and United Arab Emirates. The aim of the project initially was to understand what kind of statistical indicators, ICT indicators, could be calculated from mobile positioning data, mobile phone data. And perhaps the original plan of the project was to do a little research, do a little data mining, and come up with the ideas. In reality, basically, we had to come up with all the potential indicators already before starting the project. The reason for that I will explain a bit later. But for all of the countries that's involved, except for Sweden, Sweden has a bit separate topic, but for 5 countries of the project, we tried to calculate basically 16 different indicators, sorry, that we developed the methodology. What are the indicators? We linked them with existing ICT indicators, and some indicators were actually totally new, and we called them BD as Big Data Indicator 01 and so on. So they covered quite a wide aspect of ICT, but mostly obviously they were focused on the possibility of mobile phone data to actually get some insight or information on this specific indicator. Now, not all indicators we were able to calculate in all of the countries, but there were definitely indicators that we could calculate in majority of the countries. The project, as mentioned, started in 2016, and it involved several steps. Obviously, first step was involvement of the stakeholders, preparation of the project. Then we started working on administrative and legal aspects of the project, accessing data, how the data is processed, what are the responsibilities, and so on and so on. After that, obviously, the preparation for the data itself, mostly done by the mobile network operators. Then, after the let's say the data was actually calculated or prepared. It was calculated according to the methodology that we proposed, all these 16, 15 and 16 indicators. The data was analyzed, the reports were created, and obviously in the end, we summarized all the results in the final report. Now, the boxes indicate also the more or less the proportion of how much time was actually spent on each step of the project. And you can see that administrative and legal aspects, obviously related mostly to the data access, were the lengthiest. Now, all in all, obviously in different countries, the process took a bit different time, but in general, the whole project took more than a year to conduct. And I think this is a very good example from for, let's say, various projects that Positium and I have been involved elsewhere. It really takes a lot of time, and not very many things can be done fast enough. But generally speaking, at least 1 year might be a good proportion of time to take into account when dealing with mobile positioning data, especially if you're starting with this. Regarding the administrative and legal aspects, these also divided the different steps. It took quite a lot of time to request or to get the confirmation from the mobile network operators or the data providers to participate in the project. Obviously, a lot of time went on the legal basis for the cooperation. How can we access the data? Where should the data be processed? What kind of data is sent outside of the data providers? We also did cooperation with the local data protection agencies to have the approval or okay to go in this specific model. As mobile network operators, they are usually a very big organizations with very quite tall business hierarchy. So approvals from different departments were necessary. And it did take a lot of time as well. And obviously, during the project, there were several let's say aspects of who will be able to deal with the data. We had to sign NDAs with the ITU data scientists who were actually conducting the analysis and these kind of things. So all in all, a very large part of this 1 year was spent on resolving administrative and legal aspects. So I think this is also from the poll, you could see that a lot of obstacles or the main barriers we can see is access to the data. And we see that that's obviously true, although in all of the countries, project countries that we were participating, we actually did resolve it. We had a solution, and in the end, the pilot was, in my opinion, very successful for showing not just the resulting indicators, which is very practically very interesting for ICT statistics, but also the steps that were taken, experience both in ITU, in the participating countries, in the organizations that were stakeholders. So I think it's a very good benchmark for the projects. Regarding the major challenges, mentioning again administrative and legal procedures for accessing the data, that's I think the single most challenging aspect of the project. We did not get all the data providers in all of the countries, so this was also one of the objective of the project to get as many data providers or as many mobile network operators and internet service providers in case of Sweden involved, but it did not work out the way it is. So this is the reality. Also, as I mentioned, the initial idea of the project was more of the exploratory, trying to dig in the data, understand what the data is about, understand what kind of indicators could be calculated from the data. But it turned out that because of well, let's put it this way, the expectations from the data providers were much more clear in terms that they wanted to understand what kind of indicators need to be calculated with a specific methodology, with a specific example of the codes or algorithms already. So we had to redefine our plan for the project into exploratory projects, into actually a defined methodology project that was very clear and transparent for that matter. And also, I noticed a lot of people also marked in the poll that the resources, and we also did struggle a bit with having or being able to hire the data scientists who would actually conduct the analysis. So it's we're talking about data engineers and data scientists, and we know that in today's world, these people are not just walking on the streets and looking for the job. Mostly they are all hired already, and it's quite difficult to hire this kind of people. Regarding the stakeholders who were involved in the project from ITU side, obviously the staff members of ICT Data and Statistics Division, Esperanza, Frederick also, there were a few more people involved, obviously. Project coordinator, this is me, I was involved in that, so somebody has to keep track and actually push forward all the activities mentioned before in all of the countries. On ITU side also, we had 2 data scientists working with the countries, and I should already say that 2 data scientists for the duration of such projects, we should have had more, but this is obviously the reality that we had to face. On the pilot countries, the countries participating in the projects, telecommunication regulators were involved, or ICT Ministry, National Statistics Institutes and offices, telecommunication service providers, obviously, so mobile network operators, and data protection authorities. These were the main stakeholders involved in all of the countries, in most cases. Here and there we had an extra stakeholders, but in general, when talking about mobile positioning data, these are the parties that are involved. In addition to that, obviously, if we are talking about, for example, indicators in tourism, we should also have Ministry of Tourism or Ministry of Tourism boards and like that. But in this case, it was ICT Statistics, so these were the stakeholders. Frederick already described the 2, let's say, models of data processing. I'm just going to repeat this the same way. We did have separate models in different countries. So, for example, in Kenya, the Philippines, and UAE, we had a model where the data providers, the mobile network operators, they were responsible, and they actually demanded that the processing of the data takes place within the infrastructure of the mobile operator, and no raw data will leave their premises. We did not have any sandbox, although we proposed a very specific description of the data that is required, and also a very specific description of the methodology and how to calculate those indicators. And in these 3 countries, this was the model how it was done. In the end, the operators aggregated the data, and this aggregated data was then passed to the responsive stakeholder in the country, where it was combined, and then resulting indicators were calculated and analyzed in the end. The second option is where the data providers agreed, and there was a legal basis for actually extract the raw data itself. It was pseudonymized data, not linked to a specific people, but extracted anyways as a microdata to ITU or respective stakeholder. And the processing of the microdata then took place outside of the mobile network operators. This allowed for much better flexibility on processing the data, on tweaking the methodology, and in the end, combining the data. But obviously, this case only works in the countries where potentially there is a legislation that allows this kind of processing. So both of these models were applied. The third model, which Frederick mentioned, where we have there's a sandbox, and external parties such as regulator or ICT Ministry can access the sandbox, play somewhat with the sample data, create the algorithms, and then the algorithms are run on the whole data set. We did not employ, but obviously this is also an option. Just to mention, I think that this sandbox or third option is one of the best, because it's a solution, hybrid solution between these 2. It allows the benefits of both models, but from my experience, usually this takes a bit of more time implement compared to these two options that were described here. Nevertheless, I think it's a valid option. Now, I'm not going to show you all indicators, but just two of those. So, for example, BDO5, number of subscriptions or number of mobile devices with actual practical access to a specific technology. We're looking at 2G, 3G, and 4G access, or how many of the population or mobile devices based on the data we're actually using the services. And 4G, obviously, as the latest technology at that time, only 15% of the, let's say, subscribers were able to access 4G or actually used 4G connections in the country. But you can see a very clear how you can compare different countries. In Philippines case, for example, this indicators for some reason was not possible to calculate. Nevertheless, you get already a quite interesting view on the specific ICT indicator. It shows clearly the development of the country, and I think it's a very good way for understanding, for example, digital divide. This indicator was calculated for the whole country as well as different administrative units or subdivisions of the country. Here, example from Kenya, same indicator and presented by the proportion of participants or mobile devices using 4G technology around the country. And you can also see clear differences, clear regional differences. I think it's a very good basis for decisions on investments, decisions on policy, where to develop technology more, where to improve the quality of the network or by the mobile network operators, as well as the national policy. The second indicator I'm going to show was calculated by mobile network operators in Arabic Emirates, and this was we didn't define clearly the indicator. We just discussed about the possibilities, and I think in the Emirates, the operators decided that it would be very interesting to calculate the origin destination matrices of their subscribers. So we have 7 different Emirates in the whole country, and this visualization shows what is the proportion of people who, for example, live in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Sharjah and then commute every day to either the same emirate or other emirates. Obviously, this is a very good basis for transportation statistics, but it's not an ICT statistics for that matter. Continuing to the lessons learned, I don't have too much time for that, but I think there are many more lessons. But personally, I think preparing all administrative and legal procedures to access the data before the project starts is something of essence. Again, the administrative and the legal aspects of the project took a lot of time. We did have already something prepared, but in all countries, we were faced with the problem of too many open questions. Where does the processing take place? What is the legal basis to calculate the data? Are the operators allowed to provide such data? Are the operators obligated to provide such data? And things like that. And again, from my experience, in majority of the country of the world, it's still a gray area. And it would be very beneficial if clear legal instruments, if clear legislation was set up to provide, on one hand, the possibility for the government agencies, the ICT Ministry or Statistical Office, to request this kind of data, and on the other side, for mobile network operators and data providers, as we call them, privately held data owners, to either be allowed to provide this kind of data or be obligated to provide this kind of data. Which way is it? Is it obligation? Is it mandatory or not mandatory? It's ideological question, but it definitely took us a lot of time to understand what are the legal aspects of that. Same thing for the methodology. Yes, we started with the idea of maybe we can dig into data and do some explorations. No, because in most cases we were not able to dive in the data to do data mining. we had to create a very clear and standard methodology without any ambiguity. And definitely, this involves, for example, detailed data source description. What is the data source that we require? What is the calculation methodology for each indicator? Also to provide example algorithms or software or code for the calculation of these indicators. I did mention that we do have two different models of processing the data. Again, this depending on the legal situation, depending on the availability of the resources for that matter, it would be very good to understand already in advance where should the data be processed, either on the mobile operator side, on the data provider side, or by the external organization, by the regulator, by the statistical office, by the ICT ministry. Second thing is also the preparation of infrastructure for calculation, specifically in the case of where the data is processed outside of the mobile operators, and having the capable human resources as a data scientist, as data engineers. We are talking about terabytes of data, even per day sometimes. A lot of this data is actually, I would not call junk, but it's data that requires cleaning, cleansing and cleaning. So it does require, first of all, the calculation resources. Second of all, people who are able to do that with expertise. And the combination of those is something that is necessary to have before going to this adventure. One thing that was not covered fully in this project, but this is a very important aspect when actually creating the production line for this kind of statistics, is the validation of the data, both the initial data, the intermediate steps of processing, and the outcoming data. In the project case, we were not able to validate whether the data was actually, all correct, but this was not the purpose of the project. But definitely, because the data comes from the unvalidated data source, it's a business data of mobile operators. They can actually do whatever they want with this data. And depending on them, or depending even on some technical aspects, the data might not be up to the quality required for calculation of specific indicators. So validation is something definitely that needs to be taken into account, and valid data has to be validated. Otherwise, we might not be sure whether the outcome is actually adequate. The final thing, yes, it's a minor thing, but agreed method of data transfer from what kind of data is transferred from the mobile network operators to whom. Even such details as what is the data format, is it packed? Do you use VPN for that matter? Do we push the data or pull the data, and these kind of technical aspects? All in all, I think the preparation is the key for being to be able to conduct the project as fast as possible, to be prepared. And I think all this information, as Frederick also described, there are quite many sources already, methodological guides on working with mobile positioning data for population, for ICT. It's all written in there. Obviously, it has to be adjusted to the local circumstances. But I think all in all, the access to the data is the main barrier. But from my experience, and I've worked with, I think, something more than 30 countries on the MPD, it has never been, in the end, the issue. In the end, if there is a need, if there is a specific pain, and mobile positioning data can resolve the pain, and the pain is high enough, this will be resolved. COVID showed an excellent example of how governments, mobile network operators, and other stakeholders work together and were able to overcome these obstacles in very quick manner. Thank you for bearing with me. As I said, I was a project coordinator for this project. Esperanza was the responsible boss of our project from ITU. And I will be expecting your question after the workshop. Thank you very much.
Thank you again, Margus. Really interesting presentation, and I hope that we'll have some interesting questions coming in from the participants. A quick reminder to either please post those in the Q&A panel, or to save them up and ask them at the end when we have our Q&A session. But I'd now like to hand over to Esperanza from ITU to please share your slides and when you're ready to start your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Thomas, Margus, and Frederick, for the excellent presentations. I just want to check if you can now see my screen.
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about mobile phone big data and the experiences that we have related to information society statistics, which is in addition to the work that Margus had shown us. So let me just reshare it. Can you see the full screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So the work that we were doing in ITU involves a number of
Sorry, Esperanza, we just lost your share screen.
Can you see it now?
We can see the presentation. We can still see the PowerPoint. There we go. Yeah.
Okay, great. So the work that we do on big data in the ITU, MPD is one of them. There are other areas of big data that we are looking at. But for the purposes of today's presentation, we are focusing on MPD for information society statistics. So one part of it was already presented by Margus, but today I'll share with you the most recent developments that we've done in the ITU, including the most recent use cases, as well as other work that are related to improving the use of mobile phone big data. So I will talk about some of those use cases and some of the recommendations that relates to how data could be accessed at the national level with all the different stakeholders, and other new developments that involves cooperation and additional work that we do with other partners. So for those of you who are not familiar with ITU statistics work, we collect and disseminate ICT statistics as the UN specialized agency related to ICT. So we have a number of publications, we do a number of events, as well as develop methodologies that relates to the area of work that we cover in our statistics work. We also provide technical assistance through our online academy, as well as face-to-face workshops and trainings. So maybe many of you know that we have also 5 SDG indicators that we are tasked to monitor and report to the SDG monitoring framework through the UN Statistics Division. And so specifically, 2 of these SDG indicators are using or we are investigating to use mobile phone big data. One is on the percentage of population using the mobile network, as well as the proportion of individuals using the internet. So particularly on the target 17.8, I think Frederick mentioned to you that there's not many countries collecting the data through traditional household surveys. So we have to find a way to help countries who are not able to collect this data through household surveys, and see whether we can use mobile phone big data to either complement existing information or supplement those information that the countries have or don't have. So this is just a diagram of the data that we collect. So household statistics, or household indicators that we collect directly from national statistical offices. Those are collected usually by household surveys, but also administrative data that are coming from regulators and ministries. The third aspect is on the exploration of the use of big data, and we have two areas. One is on the MPD, and the other one is on other open or privately held data sets. So we collect the data through our different questionnaires that we send to national focal points in the regulatory agency or ministry and the National Statistics Office. And this data collection happens throughout the year. But specifically, the first pilot that was mentioned by Margus, we look at 6 countries, each country representing every region of the ITU. And then most recently, between 2020 and 2021, we worked with Brazil and Indonesia, 2 of the biggest countries with regards to population, to see whether mobile phone big data could be used to calculate these 2 SDG indicators that I mentioned. So specifically, Brazil calculated percentage of population using the internet, as well as in Indonesia, the proportion of the population covered by mobile signal. We also have some ongoing discussions, either directly with us, such as Malaysia, Liberia, and Uganda. We also have discussions that involves other stakeholders and partners, such as in Mongolia, in Uruguay, and of course in Tunisia and Botswana, which are being led by Positium and the UN Statistics Division. And this guide was already mentioned by Frederick when he presented on the different elements that's needed for collecting the data or for analyzing the data coming from mobile phone big data. But I invite you to check this after this webinar, because you will be able to see the different elements related to the data access, reference data, how the data could be calculated for those 2 indicators, and how the validation or the quality assurance could be done. And we also featured the experiences from specifically from Brazil and Indonesia in this guide. So an example of the indicator 1781, percentage of population using the internet. So in Brazil in 2021, you can see on the map that with this mobile phone big data pilot that they did, they were able to map the percentage of the population using the internet in Rio de Janeiro. The dark parts of the map shows that there's a very high penetration of internet usage, but in areas where you have very light blue, there's still some parts of the population not using the internet. So the point here is with the mobile phone big data, not just that the data are very timely, so you can get the data, for example, from the last month from mobile operators, but you will be also able to have a more disaggregated data that could help not just the policymaker, but also the operators, the national statistical offices, and whoever may want to use this data to target the necessary interventions that they need to put in place. And they were also able to compare the results of the mobile phone big data with household survey results. So in the area of Rio de Janeiro, when you look at the MPD result and the survey result, the results are really very, very close. And they made to conclude that they will be using MPD for future analysis of this type of indicator. So I think they are trying to discuss with the mobile operator how they can get a more sustainable access to the data so that they don't have to wait for a year to get the survey results. They will be able to see how many of this population are using the internet and able to extend this to the rest of the Brazil areas, not just in Rio de Janeiro. Same in Indonesia, this one, and in Brazil, this one is looking at percentage of the population covered by mobile signal. This is SDG indicator 9C1. And so in Indonesia, in this map, you will be able to see that the different areas where the dots are very dark, that there's really high coverage of the population with regards to this mobile signal, while the low or the lighter dots shows that there's little or very little population covered by mobile signal. So for operators and for policymakers, they will be able to identify where interventions are needed to make sure that the population are able to use mobile phone or internet access in those areas. In Brazil, it's the same case. Here, they represented it differently. They showed, for example, the different areas. Again, this is the municipality, I think, of Rio de Janeiro. And then here, they were able to show what type of technologies are available in the different areas of the country. So again, for makers, operators, and NSOs, and other researchers that are interested in using this data, they will be able to see more timely and more granular data. National coordination, as Margus and Frederick mentioned, is crucial in implementing MPD projects. In the pilot that we did in 2016, as Margus mentioned, we put all stakeholders. And you may wonder, why do we need all of them? Because they play different roles, and these roles are important in ensuring that, of course, data could be accessed, but at the same time, data could be analyzed and used by whoever will be benefiting from the results of the MPD analysis. The telecom regulator and the ICT ministries, they are working directly with the mobile operators, providing licenses, as well as analyzing the data that are coming from them. So in comparison with other use cases, information society or ICT statistics is very, I would say, advantageous for regulators and ministries and national statistical offices, because we are particularly getting the data from the market itself. So the regulators can have frequent interactions with the operators, and they have good connections with the mobile network operators to be able to make discussions and negotiate regarding the data access. The National Statistics Office has a very important role to play because they are guided with Statistical Act. They have the mandate to produce official statistics, such as the ones that I mentioned to you on SDG indicators. And at the same time, they are expected by the international monitoring framework to be able to provide this data. And then in addition, they have the skills necessary to analyze this type of data or the statistical information that may be derived from MPD. The mobile operator is, I would say, one of the most important stakeholder because they are the holder of this data. They have equipments and expertise to store and process the data. And they have the obligation in many cases to provide this data to the regulatory agency as part of their license obligations. And in many cases, they have the skills, the staff that can analyze this data, not just for statistical purposes, but also for this business purposes. And of course, the Data Protection Agency, because they provide guidance with regards to the lawful use of this data and how this data could be processed. Ensuring that the safeguards are in place, ensuring privacy and anonymization of this data. But I mentioned to you that data access, even in our poll and in the two presentations that you heard, data access is still a crucial issue. And when we talk to countries, when we talk to other stakeholders, we are always asked in terms of how we can help access the data in countries, or how can we discuss with operators. So as international agencies, we are in most cases able to facilitate data access, but data access discussions are often happening at the country level. So it's very important that the National Statistics Office and regulators are able to convince their mobile operators to share the data for official statistics. And here are some of, I would say, tips that could be used to convince the mobile operators. And one of them is the importance of building trust and relationship. So in many cases, the mobile operators are threatened when they are required to provide the data because they feel that they are being audited or being monitored whether they are complying to their license obligations. So it's important that you build the trust and relationship and be able to say in a clear manner that the data will be used for statistical purposes and that there's trust with the different stakeholders when discussing data access. The legal and regulatory framework is very important. I think Frederick mentioned already and Margus that it's important that the laws that exist in the country, there's some countries that has enacted laws that requires mobile operators to share the data for statistical purposes. But indeed, there's still a need in many cases to sign MOUs to make sure that the data are provided by the mobile operators, as well as defining the many responsibilities and legal obligations among the different stakeholders. We need to ensure and assure them that the data will be anonymized and secured because the mobile operators have the obligation to ensure that the privacy of people who are subscribing to their services are secured, and that strong data protocols and anonymization will be employed when analyzing the data. Sometimes data scientists needs to sign non-disclosure agreements, and this is a normal, I would say, protocol when using this new data source. We also need, or you also need to explain the value of sharing the data. So in many cases, it's the policymakers or whoever is using the results of the data or the results of the MPD exercise who should explain what is the value of the data that will be coming out from this analysis. So as we see, there are many applications, and it's important that the operators are clear that the data are needed for interventions that will benefit the population and not just to monitor their operations. There are standard protocols and data transfer format, technical support that could be explained to them, like what Margus and Frederick explained. And this needs to be clarified to the mobile operators. There's collaborative frameworks that needs to be put in place, such as maybe informal working groups, but it's good to have things in place so that each of the parties who will be involved in the discussions and in the data sharing and analysis have clear roles and obligations in the implementation of the use cases and the projects. The mobile operators, of course, is a private company, are private companies, and in many cases, or usually, they do this for monetary purposes. But they have to be assured that there could be incentives from joining the projects. It can be, in some cases, related to their tax rebates or some regulatory compensation or whatever is existing in the country. They can be recognized when releasing the results, and they can also be pursued to say that learning how to use MPD for these purposes will open other business opportunities for them. I remember hearing a case in one of our use cases where the operator was testifying that if an operator stayed with a traditional business, meaning providing fixed and internet business alone, they're going to miss the ride because data monetization is a new thing for mobile operators. So this is a new business opportunities for them. But for statistical purposes, it has to be shared for free. So communication and advocacy. So there needs to be educational workshops and seminars and explaining to all stakeholders, raising awareness on the importance of data sharing and the importance of deriving these results. So all of this could be useful for many cases, and you don't need to do all of them, but you can see what applies to the different country scenarios that you have. So some of the way forward that I would like to share with you, these are new developments and also ongoing work. One of them is on the use of on the development of synthetic mobile phone big data. So the objective here, this is a work of the task team on mobile phone big data. And the main objective here is to be able to derive synthetic data that simulate the real world mobile phone device movements and positions. And here our objective is to use the synthetic data when providing trainings or countries, national statistical offices who may want to explore MPD without having to bother about data access. So you can have the possibility to use this synthetic data to practice and learn on methodologies and also explore new areas that you think could be useful for statistical purposes. So currently, there's a subgroup in the task team that is working on this, and we are hoping that in the near future that we will be able to share this synthetic data for national statistical offices as well as ministries and regulators to use this. There's also the Python codes on information society that we are developing and will be sharing with people or national statistical offices who would like to share this or to learn how to use the mobile phone for information society. We also have a mobile collaboration with the World Bank, and here we would like to pilot in 30 countries by 2030 the use of MPD in different applications. And the idea here is we will be kicking off in June 2024 the different activities that is related to this project. And we will be discussing this in the conference in Bilbao, Spain. If you're not yet registered, I invite you to go to the website of the conference. This is organized by the UN Statistics Division and supported by different agencies, including the ITU. The topic this year is on sustainable tourism, climate change, and biodiversity. But there are several sessions that will be staged in the conference, including a demo of the ITU Python codes, high-level sessions on MPD for tourism, workshops on MPD latest developments, and the maturity matrix, theory of change, and roadmap for MPD project that is related to the ITU World Bank collaboration. So all that can be found in our website, and also in the context here, you will be able to get to us and seek more clarification if necessary. With that, I give back to you the floor, Tom, and welcome any question after this. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Esperanza. Another great talk. Thank you for sharing your thoughts and experience on the use of mobile phone data for information society statistics. I believe we still have a very short amount of time available for some questions. I haven't seen any shared in the Q&A tab, but if anyone would like to either post a question there in the chat or raise their hand, I think we could maybe squeeze in a couple of quick questions. While we're waiting for anyone to volunteer a question, perhaps I can quickly ask the panel briefly to comment on one question. Given the results of the poll and some of the challenges that have been highlighted, perhaps the speakers could comment quickly on what they think we could do as a community to enable more NSOs to make use of MPD data, especially for information society statistics. Perhaps some ideas what we can do collaboratively across the community. I don't know, Esperanza, if you'd like to start, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, in the task team, I think the one thing that I forgot to mention is the task team on mobile phone big data. Although today we are talking about information society statistics. There's 5 more areas that we're looking at. Tourism, migration, disaster, population dynamics, and transport. And I think these areas will all be using one data access. So there's a lot of collaboration that could be explored. And I invite those countries who are wanting to explore either one of these areas to get back to us and let us know if you are interested in knowing how you can implement these projects and at the same time learn from the different experiences of others. The task team is open for experts as well as national statistical offices and government agencies to join, either to share your experiences and as well as to learn from the experiences of others. So I think that's my main take for that question. There's a question on the 8th International Conference on Big Data, whether it will be conducted virtually. So currently it will be, I think it's planned to be physical, but there will be, I'm sure, some form of webinars or webcast where participants will be able to see what's going on in the plenaries. More information will be posted in the conference website. I'll post it in the link.
Thank you, Esperanza. Frederick or Margus, would either of you like to comment or alternatively share any other concluding thoughts?
Yes, I'll just take a quick word. I think as a community, the biggest challenge has been explaining the value of this cooperation to the mobile network operators, to providers. They are big business units, and it often depends on, of course, who are the people you're talking to, because even they already see the value in the data. We talked about this monetization, that they want to start earning the money even from the data, but still, it's very often we see the case that you especially if you don't have a legal mandate to ask them for the data, and perhaps they're willing to share the data based on they do have this social responsibility divisions and things like that, which might I've seen some projects in doing that they see how their data might improve the society. You can plan better public transportation based on data that they have. You can further develop the ICT level of the country, but still they are the businessmen. So what is the value? I mean, we're not talking about direct monetary value, because of course they will take the money if you want. But if we're dealing in the world where for statistical offices, the data should be free, but they definitely need some kind of incentives to understand why should they be the one providing the data. And I think this is one of the biggest, let's say, opportunities for the society around the world to present a very specific and clear value for the data providers. Of course, there are more, but I think this is the biggest one.
Thanks so much, Frederick.
Yeah, thank you. No, I think it's. I think they've been saying the most things. I do think that definitely looking at the statistical laws and see how they are is a good approach. But at the same time, what Margus was saying in terms of the looking at finding the balance between the specific use cases that you need to have the data for at the correct level in a way. If it's aggregated data, but actually the processing happens, and making sure that this is that they understand the value of why doing this, but not necessarily simply asking for all the information in that sense, because that will not happen. So finding the really right use cases and really showing why it's important, and then do that. I think that might be the way forward as well. I also want to just say that there is the trend in a way. There's a lot of multi-large corporations that are opening up their data in a bit more, and I guess this is a hope in a way as well, so that the telecom will do that a bit more as well, looking at Microsoft and Meta, for example, and others. So I think that there is a trend there. There's something to move towards. So.
Thanks so much. I think with that we're very much close to time. I can see there's a couple of hands raised. but I want to make sure we have time for some closing remarks. So I'd encourage anyone who has any further questions to please reach out to our speakers, and hopefully we can continue this discussion. And I'd like to give Mola the chance to make some closing comments before we end. I'll quickly also share in the chat links to the MPD Raising Awareness course and the Information Society Handbook that Esperanza mentioned as well.
Thank you, Thomas. It was exciting and interesting. I'd like to hear from you, all of the speakers, and I'd like also to thank those joining us the webinar. We had close to 100 participants at one point. I think as we move forward, let's collaborate, to continue collaborate, innovate, and also overcome the challenges that you have mentioned: data access, legislation, methodologies, and also all sorts of things. I'd like also to ask we graduate from promoting and talking about this in webinars, workshops, to go on the ground to test, especially in the member states in Africa. We have our regional hub for big data and data science, which is also a platform to collaborate, undertake research, and undertake research projects. I would like to ask African member states also to reach out to us to coordinate and collaborate and further this conversation and do something on the ground. But before I say, I see Ivan Murenzi, who is the Deputy Director General of Statistics Rwanda. Who, we have the regional hub. We co-lead the regional hub as a UNECA and the Statistics Rwanda. I'd like also him to just say a few words and maybe officially close the webinar. Over to Thomas. Thank you so much, colleagues and speakers.
Thank you. Please, Ivan, if you're able to unmute, please go ahead.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you, Mola, for the opportunity. I think it was a challenge to express some thoughts because of the chat. The chat is not available for us to send a question or comment, at least from my side. I had a couple of them, and I wish I was able to chat and share them. But thanks to the presenters. One, the issue of access to data. I was wondering if there's a note, a guidance in terms of the gains from that access to all stakeholders. And I think that's one, if you have something that's been done to be able to use it as the way that would be very appreciated. And also wanted to, as Mola said, to propose that maybe Mola, with us partnering with you, to have this as a real physical workshop at some point, because the issues you've raised are very relevant. But maybe where we can call other stakeholders, especially from the private sector, the telecoms and the like, and we engage on some of these matters. So I think that's something we'll be happy to do in partnership with the Mola's office. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Thomas, back to you.
Thank you, and thank you, Ivan, for your comments as well. And thank you again to all of our speakers, to everyone who's participated today. Apologies if there have been some challenges with the chat function, which have created barriers preventing people from asking questions. I hope that you've had the opportunity to learn a lot from our speakers today, and I would encourage you all to reach out if you do have any further questions, and also to join part 2 of this webinar, which will showcase in more detail the experiences of some of the countries discussed today and other countries. Perhaps Jonas or Esperanza, you might be able to share some details on when that is scheduled to occur.
we will be, I think ECA will be sending another invitation for that as soon as the dates are fixed. Or maybe Jonas, you have that information now.
Yeah, it's correct. We'll inform you. Tomorrow we have another meeting, so we'll inform you after that.
Yeah, it's gonna definitely happen, but we'll discuss here in our office and let you know the specific date and time. Thank you so much again, everyone.
Great. Thank you, everyone, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day. And I look forward to continuing this conversation at the next webinar. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.